In the age of Spotify, are universities still thinking like Blockbuster? If you work in university comms, marketing, or digital, you'll recognise this. Websites organised around internal structures, making it hard for students to find what they need. It's a bit like wandering around a Blockbuster for 20 minutes, trying to pick a film, whereas nowadays you can just get it served up instantly. My guest today is Tom Noble-Sabokbar, digital experience and AI consultant, and the author of a piece arguing that this mismatch is costing universities attention, trust, and ultimately applications. We'll explore why this way of organising has stuck around, what students really want when they search, and what it looks like for universities to start thinking more like Spotify. Stick around and you might start seeing your own website in a different way. I'm Gareth Hughes, and this is the University Comms podcast. So Tom, thanks for coming along onto the podcast today.
Thank you very much for having me, Gareth.
Just to get things started, you just want to give us a bit of background about you, your role?
So I'm a digital experience and AI consultant at Squiz. We're a digital experience platform, and we offer digital experience platform solutions, some of which include conversational search and AI tools. My day-to-day looks like consulting universities on what to do from a digital experience perspective and how to improve the customer or student experience. My background is marketing. So I ran a social media agency in Amsterdam for a few years. And previous to that, I was working at Vice magazine, creating content for Gen Z and millennials. So very much
Nice.
The kind of target audience that universities work with.
Yeah, sounds cool. So what is the Spotify paradox?
The Spotify paradox. So I guess the analogy came from this realization that Blockbuster is not around anymore. And it's a brand that most millennials and previous generations are familiar with. And it got me thinking, why do they not exist anymore? And, there's many reasons, but one of them is that they didn't embrace technology. They had an opportunity to buy Netflix, and they didn't do that. I think for £10 million, which would have been an incredible investment. I mean, some universities are hundreds of years old and have been around for forever. So digital feels like a small chunk of that time, but actually digital and the rate of change of digital is faster than any other technology in history. And so to not embrace it feels like a massive missed opportunity. And especially in the market, that if you consider macroeconomic issues that are going on around us, not embracing digital feels like a bit of an own goal, to be honest with you. And institutions like Manchester, who have released, I think I saw this week, report on half of all students are going to be online in the next few years. Forward-thinking institutions like that will survive. And this is a pretty bold statement, but I do think there will be some losers in this. And I think the losers will be those that don't embrace change. And I think the Spotify paradox really comes from thinking about the end user experience. Quite frankly, students do not care how universities are organized.
Yeah.
They don't care. They're thinking about what can the university provide me and how can I get to that information as quickly as possible. They don't care about a legacy system that they're having to log into and scroll for 25 minutes. And actually, it turns into a research project in itself. I think students now and young people now in general, and I think all ages, to be honest, we're in an age of immediacy around information. And we're also in an age of omniscience where we've never had so much information at our fingertips. And yet there are many institutions and many companies who have not caught up with that trend.
Yeah.
And to not embrace that, I think, like I said previously, is a hugely missed opportunity.
And I guess just thinking about that, why that might be the case that universities haven't embraced that trend yet or aren't set up like that. So I think in the piece that you wrote, the argument was around that currently, in the same way that when you walked into a Blockbuster back in the day, you'd have to kind of go to a specific genre section or look for whatever was on promotion. Universities, similarly to that, are kind of organised around their own internal structures. Is that right? Is that what you meant by the kind of the
correct?
Blockbuster
Yeah,
model?
Exactly. Students still have to search through different sections of websites that they shouldn't have to be honest. The way that universities are structured, of course, is important. However, students should not be exposed to that. They are the end customer. They are the consumer of the information. They shouldn't have to do a research project to find that information. And I think universities struggle as well a little bit with legacy ways of working, legacy systems, but also a mentality of the early days of digital, where websites are like shop fronts, when actually websites are no longer shop fronts. They should be sources of information and places where you can convert students, whether that's from a services perspective or course information perspective, or even just finding out information about parking around the university or student life. All of that information needs to be at people's fingertips. And also you've got to think about the fact that it's not just the students who are going to be going onto the website. It's going to be parents. The parents are going to be looking on websites and thinking about, they're not going to necessarily care that much about where are the nearest nightclubs, but they're going to care about the safety element of the university. So thinking about, how safe is it for my child to go to this university? Questions like that need to be answered. I think university websites and universities in general need to be thinking more about their audiences and their experiences from a digital perspective in comparison with the private sector. The private sector is embracing it, and there's technology companies out there that are leading the charge, and universities aren't ever going to compete on that level, but what they can do is be smart and embrace certain technologies to give them the best chance of providing those experiences.
I guess just to kind of make listeners have an appreciation of what excellent looks like. You talked about technology companies like Spotify. What is their approach? How does it differ, and how do they succeed at getting people to the right information quickly?
I think it's evolved, hasn't it, massively. I remember when I first opened up Spotify, I remember being told that I have unlimited access to music and thinking this was insane. To now,
same, and it's still my like top 5 Spotify Wrapped every year is basically the same.
Yeah,
all the music in the world, and I'm still listening to the 1975 on repeat. So
I think we're all guilty of that. Although mine is now filled with Peppa Pig because of my children.
Oh, fair, yeah.
But no, and I think it's evolved massively, right? And as human behavior has evolved, even though our taste in music might not have changed, the way we might search for it might change, and that's because they've made it a lot smarter. Right, they've made it around. They've created experiences around mood, around how human beings feel, and made it much more personalized to us. So it's moved away from just I'm trying to find this artist to I feel a bit sad today, or I feel happy today, or I'm at the gym. Give me a playlist, right? And those kinds of experiences are not reflected in all websites and all digital experiences. And understandably, right, it's fairly complex to achieve something like that. But the technology now exists to close that gap. And I encourage all institutions to be thinking about it, because there will be students who will come to your website and open up a search bar and say, I'm into football and I like engineering, recommend me a course. Now, traditional searches will not return a response to that. And that's where you'll lose that conversion. However, if you can recommend and say, okay, based on what you've said, this is what we would kind of recommend. That's where it gets interesting for a university. That's where it gets interesting from a conversion perspective and a marketing perspective, because you can measure that and you can start looking at what are people asking university? What courses are people wanting to know more information about? And once they find that information, what are they doing with that information? And where are they going? And is it actually converting? And should we be investing more time into that course or promoting this type of message for the university? So yeah, that's kind of how I interpret it.
Yeah. And I guess might be a bit of a basic question, but I think it's an important one. Why is that? You've touched on some of this already in what you said, but why is it important that universities address the issue with difficulty in finding information on the web pages? Why is it important for them to move to this more kind of natural search model?
I mean, if you think about it, if let's say the rate of change is 10% every year, start using large language model style search, that's a very, very conservative estimate in terms of how much it's going to change. Google has this year, for the first time, reduced its traffic to under 90%, I think it was, for searches, which is the first time since they started taking over from a search perspective that's happened. And I think when you start realizing that the types of interactions that people are having with websites and with information is evolving to conversation and to something that's a lot more like natural language, it completely shifts how you think about content and how you think about the way you communicate to your audience. Because the idea that you just scroll and click now to surface information on websites is archaic. There is loads of evidence to suggest that university students or prospective university students are going onto websites and just immediately looking for information by typing into the search bar. That's not a new pattern, but the way that people are searching, the types of questions they're asking, is then leading them back to large language models because they're not getting the experience that they would on ChatGPT or on Claude or whatever other platform they might be searching for. Because if they can't find the information within a few seconds, they will just close the tab and go, do you know what? I can't find it. This is a mess. I can't find my way through this. I need some structure. So it's about structuring the data in the right way, but also then presenting it in a way that's consumable. So I think the importance of it, going back to your questions, I don't think that there's ever been a time where it's more important to think about how you structure your data and how you present information. I've heard examples, horror stories of universities being called up and asked whether the parking outside their university is actually £2 a day, when actually that information was surfaced from 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And students are getting this idea in their head that the experience is X when actually it's Y. And that's because we've got so many web pages, just, thousands and thousands of web pages on university sites and across digital estates. All of that information needs to be looked at and audited. Probably loads of duplication as well, where people have just decided to create another web page because that's what you do. You need to publish information, and there needs to be a serious audit of all of that information to consolidate it.
And I mean, I guess partly I'm thinking about, we're living in an increasingly competitive environment for lots of universities at the moment. So do you think that this type of reimagination of what university websites look like, really strongly considering how students are accessing information, do you think that will have an impact on recruitment activities?
On recruitment activities, without doubt. I mean, I think it transcends recruitment, but I think that's the first thing that universities will look at, right? Because that's the revenue driver. Absolutely. I think that from an experience perspective, universities have got to be considering how they're interacting with students. If their first interaction with a student is that the student has to do work to find out information about the university, you've already lost. You've already lost, because there's going to be a competitor out there that has a better digital experience and can provide that information to a student within seconds. And that's an opportunity lost for a lot of universities at the moment because they're not embracing that evolution. I think if you look at the trajectory of search and how important that's been in sort of digital evolution, this is the next step up from that. We know that university students or students go to university sites and search. A fact. That's the first thing they want to do. They want to search the site. They will scroll, they will click, but they initially want to search, right? They want to find something. They're there to either convert or to find out a piece of information. Now, how long it takes them from that search to then get to where they need to be, whether it's enrolling, whether it's finding out information about parking, is going to be the defining factor as to whether they choose your university or not. If it's a case of one or the other, and one has a much better website than the other, certainly from an international student perspective, the one that has a better digital experience is going to win.
I mentioned recruitment, but I think it's also, and you were saying there's a huge impact on student recruitment when it comes to this stuff. We spoke about this a few weeks ago. It definitely also hugely impacts the experience of current students, right? And you mentioned at the beginning about the University of Manchester wanting to increase the number of students that are studying online. And any university that's wanting to increase the number of students who are studying online is going to have to really think about investing in that digital experience. And there's so many universities with so many legacy websites, hundreds of pages of outdated content. I had Flo Vincent on the podcast recently from the University of Edinburgh, and they've been doing a really big piece of work looking at their website and how it's optimized for AI. So yeah, I guess my observation is just that, it's about the experience for current students as well, right?
Absolutely. And I think one of the key stats that I pull out frequently is that 68% of students who experience a bad site search don't then return. And I think that's a stat that, yes, of course, it points towards Squiz products. Of course it does. However, it's a reality, and there are some universities that still use Google search, and it has its pluses and minuses. It's probably free to use, which is great, but actually you can't do your own ranking. You don't get any data from that. And so kind of guessing. And I think the guesswork needs to be taken out of the work that university marketing teams are doing. They need tangible data and they need insights to be able to then drive business decisions internally. A lot of the challenges that universities face, I believe, is around the decision paralysis, where software decisions or marketing decisions require big teams of people to make those decisions. And whilst that's the beauty of university life and, the establishment that it comes from, it also creates a systemic problem, because it's really difficult to have decisions made in an environment where it needs to be completely democratic. And sometimes the data can be the leveler. And you say, actually, well, let's look at the data and let's actually figure out what the data is telling us. And then from there, let's build our business cases, whether it's improving search, whether it's acquiring an AI tool, whether it's doing a complete rehaul of your digital estate, whether it's making sure that the university portal matches the experience throughout the recruitment cycle, because that's another challenge that a lot of universities face, right? They sold the dream and then they come into the university and actually the portal is not great, and it's really difficult to find information there as well. Or, once they've joined, they just can't find the things they're looking for. That's a negative experience, and it can lead to students dropping out, and retention rates are an issue, of course. So I think, there's a whole range of different topics that you can cover with this. And I've spoken to lots of different universities about this, and the challenges are never 100% the same, because all institutions have different challenges, but they are similar in many ways. And the key one for me that pops out all the time is just, are you giving them the Spotify experience? Are you matching the private sector? Or at least trying to match the private sector in some way, so that when they engage with you, they come away from it feeling that there's at least been some concerted effort to improve the technology, and that they feel that the university is investing in them as well.
Yeah. So I think lots of people listening to this will be like in 100% agreement that like the problem has been diagnosed, and there'll be people like, yes, I completely agree. I guess you've worked with lots of universities on this, so it'd be interesting to know, how do you get from A to B, or to begin to approach B? So how do you get from Blockbuster style at the moment to, maybe not straight away to Spotify, but what can universities do to kind of move in that direction?
There's not a one size fits all, I would say, because institutions are just set up so differently. But there is an approach that we take, which is taking a slice of content. So just starting off small and deciding whatever that might be. For the University of Greenwich, we built out a conversational search, which is kind of AI search around student life. So that gave us a really good starting point, because when students, we looked at the data around where to start with this, and student life felt safe. Firstly, because you're not surfacing fees. Lots of universities would be terrified about surfacing fees in a conversational engagement. But I think starting off with a slice that feels safe, but also adds value. And this was around clearing. So we launched this around clearing with them. Yeah, we felt like student life felt like the right place to start. That's the first sort of test or pilot that we did. And now it's broadening out to other parts of the universities. There will be a world where all of the information that's on the website will be able to be surfaced in a conversational manner. And I think that should be the ambition for universities, is to present information in the easiest way to consume possible. Whether that's even having voice response from the website, that's a great aspirational state. Wouldn't it be great if I could just ask a question to the website and it could respond to me with voice response? That would be great. But there is a world where that exists even now, right? So I think it's universities at the moment are being told to do more with less. And I think to be able to do more with less, you have to prove out what you're doing before you actually go and do it. So starting small and not having like a big bang project where we're going to just whack AI on our website. It's going to be brilliant and everyone's going to get information surfaced to them immediately. And we're going to get 100,000 new students every day. That's not reality.
Yeah.
What we need to prove out first is, can this improve conversion? Can this improve student satisfaction? You can think about it from a services perspective. One really key area that universities want to focus on, and understandably so, is mental health. So can something like this help as a frontline service where initially the right questions can be asked by the university if someone's engaging with the website about their mental health? And of course, at some point, there will need to be human intervention. And I think that this is a really important point to bring up as well. AI is not going to replace every job. It's not going to. There will be efficiencies through it, but also it needs to be embraced because technology can solve a lot of problems. It can't solve everything. It's definitely not going to solve everything, but it can help with the maybe more basic questions that need to be asked. And the reason I bring up the mental health example is because, if someone says something quite extreme, then that should be directed immediately to a human being. And there should be human intervention there to make sure that that student or whoever is engaging with the website gets the support that they need on a human level. And they're directed to either a phone number or another, type of engagement.
So if someone wanted to begin a project like this, how would they do that?
So the way we would start is with the Squiz consulting team. So what we'd probably start with is looking at 20 to 30 things that prospective students, let's start with that, actually ask and document what comes back. Let's be brutally honest about what comes back because it might not be what you're expecting. And then check to see what's popping up on your search analytics. And then we'd probably map out some ghost journeys for you and to figure out where there's drop off and where you're losing students depending on the journey. And how we would help, how Squiz would help with this, and is that we basically provide like a free search audit. We say, look, this is how you're showing up. We crawl your site and we show you exactly where it's broken or where you need to improve things. And then we provide like a report, which would basically give you like a scoring. And then we'd lead with some quick wins and say, look, like these are the areas you can improve quickly, whether it's, having the right sort of metadata or, just quick fixes that can provide you immediate improvements. And then from that point on, it's about getting stakeholder buy-in because as with any sort of university setup, there's always lots of different stakeholders that are involved in decisions like this. Bringing IT and marketing together usually is our strong point. And of being able to speak to both of those departments who usually traditionally have been quite siloed, but increasingly are being brought together because of economic reasons, but also because technology is now more accessible. And then from that point on, it's kind of doing ROI calculations like, okay, so if you invest in this tool, what are you going to save? But what are you also going to make potentially from a revenue perspective? And then kind of building it out from there. I think for me, what's really important to remember and to ask yourself as a university at the moment is, are you going to be showing up in the places that you want to be? Or are you going to let your competitors show up in those places and take those students or potential customers away? I think if you ask yourself those questions, then you'll be in a good spot to then implement or improve or evolve to match the needs of students from a technology perspective.
So Tom, really interesting chat. Great to speak to you today. If people want to hear more from you, where's the best place for them to connect?
So just reach out to me on LinkedIn, Tom Noble Sabokbar. And yeah, I always reply to messages, I promise. So feel free to drop me a DM on there or go to the Squiz website, squiz.net, and you can find more information about conversational search and all things related to AI search on university websites.
Fantastic. Cheers, Tom. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks very much, Gareth.